My parents mocked me when I said I couldn't pay rent after my son was born. "You're a man, handle it." Then they turned my childhood room into a theater. I took my baby and disappeared. They had no clue where I went, or who I'd grow into. Sometimes, the quiet betrayals cut deeper than any scream. And when the people who are supposed to be your family turn into your worst enemies, the world shifts. I learned that the hard way, the day my own parents tried to take my son. My name is Jordan, and I'm 28. My life actually began to change the day my son was born. But the real story, the one that broke me down and then built me back up, started a bit before that. It began in my parents' kitchen, under the harsh hum of those new LED lights they'd installed. I'd gone to them, not asking for money, just for some understanding, some comfort. I remember saying, "I'm not sure how I'm going to make rent this month." And my dad, without even looking at me, just cracked open a beer and smirked. "You're a man. Figure it out." My mom laughed, a light, dismissive sound, like I was complaining about a stubbed toe instead of confessing that my life raft was slowly sinking. I just nodded, grabbed my keys, and walked out. But inside, something cracked. It wasn't a loud, explosive sound. It was quiet, subtle, like ice breaking under fresh snow. And that, more than anything, scared me. You see, I wasn't always someone they brushed off. I was their miracle baby, their only kid, after a string of miscarriages. We lived in a modest house with a red door, a backyard that was mostly weeds, but it was home. They were the kind of parents who cheered loudest at my soccer games and cried at my high school graduation. But somewhere along the line, that warmth cooled. Maybe it was when I didn't go to college right away, choosing to work and save with my high school girlfriend, Madison. Or maybe it started when she left, and I stayed, trying to rebuild my life while my friends moved away and my parents just stopped asking how I was. Still, I stayed close. Every Sunday, I went for dinner. I helped them fix their roof after a storm. I even drove Mom to her doctor's appointments when Dad couldn't be bothered. I guess I kept hoping they'd come back around, that the people who once held me when I cried wouldn't one day laugh when I needed help. I didn't even tell them when Ava, my ex-girlfriend, got pregnant. Part of me was still reeling, trying to figure out if I was ready for fatherhood. Another part of me already knew the answer, even if I couldn't say it aloud. And a much bigger part of me knew they simply wouldn't care. I was living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a bakery when Ava went into labor. She didn't want me in the delivery room. Our breakup had been messy, and despite my promises to be there for the baby, she didn't trust me yet. That hurt more than I'd expected. I spent the night pacing the hospital parking lot, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, watching other couples walk in together and emerge days later with newborns in car seats, like trophies. I whispered to myself, over and over, "You're going to do this no matter what." 3 days later, I held Eli for the first time. He was so small, smaller than I'd imagined, wrinkled and red-faced, screaming his tiny lungs out. But in that moment, I didn't hear a sound. It was like the world just paused. And for once, I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like someone's dad. A week later, I brought him home. Ava and I had made arrangements. She needed time to focus on school, and I would take care of Eli full-time. I worked nights at a gas station, barely scraping by. Diapers, formula, wipes, it added up fast. I was sleeping only a few hours a night, if that. I looked like a ghost in the mirror, eyes hollow, skin pale. But every time Eli wrapped his tiny fingers around mine, it was worth it. Still, reality hit hard. I missed rent once, then almost twice. My landlord gave me a warning. I started selling off everything. My old guitar, my PS5, even a watch my grandpa had given me. And when I realized I still couldn't make it work, I did something I hadn't done in years. I asked for help. That's how I ended up in their kitchen again, humiliated and desperate, just trying to find a lifeline. What I found instead was a home theater where my bedroom used to be. I didn't even know they'd renovated. We figured it was time to make this space useful, Mom said without a trace of guilt a few weeks later when I stopped by unannounced. She led me upstairs, and there it was, sleek dark gray walls, blackout curtains, a giant screen, reclining leather seats, surround sound speakers, even a mini fridge. I just stared at it. I couldn't bring myself to step past the doorway. I had always imagined bringing Eli here someday, showing him the room where I grew up, teaching him to build pillow forts, telling him stories until he drifted to sleep. That fantasy evaporated in an instant. You should see it when the lights dim, Dad called from the living room. Feels just like the movies. I left without saying a word. That night, I held Eli a little tighter. I watched him sleep, his chest rising and falling, his lips twitching in dreams I'd never know. And I realized something profound. They didn't just turn my room into a theater. They erased me. They buried the memory of me beneath surround sound and popcorn machines. For the first time, I stopped hoping they'd come around. I started planning instead. They had no idea where I went, or who I'd become. In the weeks that followed, I kept my distance. I didn't call, didn't visit. My Sundays became sacred, just me and Eli. We'd go to the park when the weather was good, or sit on the floor and build towers out of empty formula cans. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The silence from my parents, though, spoke volumes. No one checked in. No one asked how Eli was doing. It was like we had both vanished from their lives without so much as a blink. Then, one Friday afternoon, I got a text from my mom. Just one line. Dinner Sunday. Like nothing had happened. I almost ignored it. I should have. But I was curious to see if maybe, just maybe, they were reaching out because they felt some remorse, that maybe they realized what they'd said, what they'd done. So I went. When I got there, the table was already set. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, that broccoli casserole Mom always made too salty. It looked like the kind of meal we used to share before everything went sideways. Eli was strapped to my chest in his carrier, asleep from the drive over. I walked in quietly and saw them already sitting at the table with my cousin Jason. Jason was my uncle's kid, 3 years younger than me. He was always the golden child to my parents, even though he'd flunked out of college twice and crashed 2 of his dad's cars. But he knew how to turn on the charm, especially around my mom. She always said he reminded her of what I used to be like. Whatever that meant. Look who decided to show up, Dad said, not even bothering to stand. Mom was more cheerful. Oh, you brought the baby. The baby. Like she didn't even remember his name. She didn't ask to hold him. Didn't even glance down to see if he was awake. She just turned back to Jason and started talking about some new job he got selling solar panels. He was all smiles and humble bragging, acting like he'd just invented electricity himself. They talked for nearly an hour before my dad turned to me. So, still working nights at that gas station? I nodded. Yeah, it's steady for now. Jason jumped in. Man, that sounds brutal. What do you do with the kid during your shift? I kept my voice calm. I take him with me sometimes. And when I can't, I've got a neighbor who helps. Mom made a face. A gas station isn't exactly safe for a baby, Jordan. Well, I asked for help. I said, not hiding the edge in my tone. Didn't exactly get much. Dad looked up from his plate, clearly annoyed. We raised you to be independent, not to come crying every time things got hard. Jason, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. Maybe I should. No. Mom said sharply. You're fine, sweetie. Jordan just gets like this sometimes. Like this. I didn't even know what that meant anymore. Then came the kicker. Jason might be moving in with us for a while, Mom said cheerfully. Until he gets on his feet. I blinked. Into the guest room? She smiled. No, into your old room. The theater's just a few things, really. Jason could help us move it all to the basement. I stared at her. So, you want to undo the theater to make room for him? It's not undoing anything, she said, brushing it off. He just needs a little stability. He's family. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even process it. When I needed stability, I was a grown man who needed to figure it out. When he needed a room, the theater got dismantled. Besides, Dad added, Jason's got potential. He just needs the right environment to thrive. I swallowed a bitter laugh. Of course. Jason stood up. I think I should really go. Don't want to cause any tension. You're not. Mom said, shooting me a glare. He looked at me and muttered, sorry, man, before leaving. Once he was gone, Mom sighed dramatically. You didn't have to make it so awkward. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice low but steady. You won't help me and your grandson when I'm drowning. But you're bending over backward to house Jason because he has potential? Don't turn this into something it's not. Dad snapped. You made it clear where I stand, I replied. You've been making it clear for years. They didn't respond. Just looked at me like I was the problem. Like I was being ungrateful. Like I was some bitter outsider. I left without finishing dinner. After that night, I stopped replying to their texts. I stopped updating them on Eli. I even blocked their numbers for a while, just to give myself space. But I still heard things from my aunt, from old neighbors. I heard that Jason moved in, that they helped him buy a used car, that mom was bragging at church about how proud she was of her boys, plural. Apparently, I no longer counted. But the worst part came 2 months later when I bumped into my mom at the grocery store. Eli was in the cart, giggling as he grabbed at cereal boxes. She looked surprised to see me, and even more surprised to see how well Eli was doing. "He's getting big," she said, touching his cheek like she had a right to. I didn't say anything. She looked me up and down. "You look different. Are you eating okay?" I didn't answer that either. Then she leaned in, lowered her voice, and said something I'll never forget. "You know, if you had just been more grateful, we could have helped you. But you always act like a victim." That was it. That was the moment. The moment I realized they'd never see me, really see me for who I was. Not as a son, not as a father, not as a man doing everything he could to raise his child right. I walked away without a word, but inside something shifted again. Not a crack this time. Something more solid, cold, final. They had no idea who I was becoming, but they were going to find out. It was a Tuesday night when the betrayal finally cut through whatever pieces of family I still believed we had. Eli was teething bad, screaming louder than I thought his little lungs could manage. I was pacing the apartment, half asleep, with a cold teething ring in one hand and a bottle warming in the other. I hadn't showered in 2 days. My uniform shirt was stained with formula and old coffee. But none of that mattered. All I cared about was getting him to stop hurting. My phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it at first. I was mid-bounce, rocking Eli against my shoulder when it buzzed again. And again. 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail. It was my Aunt Cheryl. That alone made me pause. Cheryl wasn't close with anyone in the family. She was the quiet, observant one, always watching from the corner during holidays, saying little, but never missing anything. For her to call me 3 times in a row, I set Eli in his crib and turned on his mobile, praying he'd settle for just 5 minutes. Then I played the voicemail. "Jordan, it's Cheryl. I know we don't talk much, but I thought you should know before you hear it from someone else. Your parents, your parents posted something on Facebook about Eli. You should check." I'm sorry. My chest went tight. I hadn't even opened the Facebook app in months, but now my hands were shaking as I logged in. Notifications popped up instantly. Messages, tags, comments, most from people I didn't recognize. It was a photo posted by my mom, Eli's face, sleeping in his car seat. The caption, "Meet our newest little angel, Eli. Our sweet grandson who we're so proud to help raise. Being grandparents is the greatest joy in the world." I stared at it for a full minute. I didn't breathe. The comments were full of congratulations. "He's beautiful. So happy for you, Mary. You're going to be the best grandparents." They were basking in praise, likes pouring in. Friends from church, co-workers, even old high school friends I hadn't spoken to in a decade. All gushing about their new chapter. Except they weren't raising him. They weren't even part of his life. They hadn't changed a diaper. Hadn't held him when he had a fever. Hadn't bought a single box of wipes. I opened the photo again and zoomed in. It had been taken at the park. That one day I'd taken Eli to the duck pond in his little sun hat, thinking we'd finally enjoy some fresh air. I remembered now. I saw my mom that day across the park, walking with a friend. I turned away, not in the mood for small talk. I never thought she'd sneak a photo, but she had. She took it without asking, posted it without permission, and now she was parading my son around like a trophy, like a symbol of her maternal success. It felt like someone had grabbed my ribs and twisted. I scrolled through the comments again, each one adding another ounce of weight on my chest. Then I saw one that made me stop cold. It was from Jason. "Can't wait to help babysit again this weekend. He's such a chill kid." My mind spun. What was he talking about? There was no again. They'd never watched Eli. And then the pieces started snapping together, fast and sharp like breaking glass. I'd started a new shift last week. Left Eli with my neighbor Carrie, who'd agreed to watch him 2 nights a week for a little cash under the table. She was older, kind, and quiet, lived 2 doors down with her cats. I trusted her. But she told me her sister would be visiting from out of town for a week, and offered to leave Eli with someone else she trusted for just one of the nights. Just one. She said she'd stay there, too. That it would be safe. She didn't say who. My mouth went dry. I called her. "Carrie, hey, sorry it's late. Just a quick question. That night last week when your sister was in town, where was Eli staying?" "Oh, with my friend Lynn's place. She and her daughter helped watch him." Why? Everything okay? I tried to breathe. Did anyone else stop by? Like my parents or a guy named Jason? Oh, well, yeah. Your mom stopped in, actually. She said she missed Eli. Lynn said she seemed sweet, so she let her hold him. I didn't think it'd be a problem. What? I barely remember ending the call. I think I said thank you. I think I was polite. But my hands were shaking. My knees felt weak. They hadn't just used his photo. They'd found a way to hold him. Without my knowledge, without my consent, they crossed a line that wasn't just about boundaries. They broke trust. They stole moments. Stole my moments. I sat on the floor and stared at the wall for what felt like an hour. Eli was snoring softly in the next room, unaware of any of it. Oblivious. Innocent. And I hated that they'd touched him. Not because they were dangerous, but because they weren't entitled. They had no right. And yet, somehow, they believed they did. That was the emotional switch. The moment the hurt calcified into something colder, cleaner. No more bargaining. No more hoping they'd change. That night, I realized they didn't want to change. They just wanted to own the version of me and Eli that fit their story. The next day, I deleted every trace of my Facebook. I pulled every photo of Eli offline. I blocked everyone who liked that post. And I made a promise. They wouldn't get to use him as a prop again. Not ever. But they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. And the next thing they did, it nearly cost me everything. The days after the Facebook betrayal passed in a blur. I went to work. I came home. I fed Eli. I bathed him. I put him to bed. And then I sat on the edge of my mattress, because we didn't even have a couch, and stared at the wall night after night. Numb, not angry, not even sad anymore, just drained. Like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that used to make me feel human. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not Cheryl, not my neighbor, not even Ava. What was I supposed to say? That my parents posed as doting grandparents online while ignoring us in real life? That they managed to get access to my son behind my back just to take a photo? That they'd allowed my cousin Jason to babysit a child whose name he probably couldn't spell? It all sounded paranoid, even to me. But that was the worst part of all. They hadn't broken the law. They hadn't screamed or cursed or hit me. What they'd done was subtle, quiet, a million little cuts hidden behind smiles, and just trying to help. And when you try to explain that kind of hurt to someone, you sound ungrateful, bitter, crazy. I remember one night, maybe 2 weeks after the photo incident, when Eli wouldn't stop crying. He had a rash on his neck, his skin was warm, and I couldn't tell if it was just teething again or something worse. I didn't have money for a doctor's visit. Not until payday. I was already behind on rent. My landlord had called twice that week, his voice getting shorter each time. I sat in the bathroom, Eli wailing against my chest, and I whispered over and over, "It's okay. It's okay." But I wasn't saying it to him. I was saying it to myself, trying to convince myself that this wasn't what failure looked like. When he finally fell asleep in my arms, I stayed there for hours, not daring to move. The floor was cold, my back was screaming, but I remember looking at myself in the mirror across from the tub. My eyes were hollow, my skin pale. There was a stubble-covered stranger staring back at me. A man who looked twice his age. That was my rock bottom. Not a screaming match. Not some explosive blow-up. Just a quiet, sleepless night in a cracked tile bathroom with no heat. Holding my sick baby, wondering if I was going to make it through the month. And the worst part? I thought about calling them. I actually stared at my mom's contact for almost 20 minutes. I told myself it would just be for Eli, not for me. That maybe if I framed it right, kept my voice calm, used the right words, they'd offer something. A ride to the clinic, a bag of groceries, anything. But then I remembered her face in the grocery store. You always act like a victim. I closed the phone and turned it off. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Not because of Eli. He was out cold. But because something inside me had finally shifted for good. I stopped hoping they'd change. I stopped waiting for them to love me the way I needed. And I started planning. Not revenge. Not at first. Just distance. I made a list. It was crude, scratched onto the back of a junk mail envelope. But it was a list of everything I needed to break free. A better job. Childcare I could trust. A new place. Any place with more than one room. And maybe, just maybe, school. Something remote, something flexible. I'd always been good with computers. I just never thought I had time. It felt impossible, but I didn't tear up the list. I folded it and tucked it under the crib. The next morning, I called a local community center that offered free parenting workshops and resources. I didn't tell anyone. I just showed up. Eli on my hip, circles under my eyes, anxiety simmering in my chest like acid. The receptionist smiled at me. "You here for the 10 a.m. single dads group?" I hesitated. Then I nodded. She handed me a pamphlet and said, "You're not the only one. Not even close." That was the first time I cried in public. Not loud, just a few tears as I sat in a circle with 5 other guys, all with babies in strollers or asleep on their chests. We talked about sleep schedules, feeding routines, how to budget on minimum wage, and how to survive being told you weren't enough. And slowly, something inside me started to wake back up. I wasn't alone. I wasn't broken. I was just rebuilding. And this time, I wasn't building anything for them. I was building something for us, me and Eli. But of course, when people sense you pulling away, they panic. And that's when my parents did something I never saw coming. They filed for grandparents' visitation rights. Claimed I was unstable. Claimed I was keeping Eli from them out of spite. Claimed they were just trying to stay in his life. And suddenly, my rock bottom had a basement. Because now they were coming for him. I remember the moment the court papers landed on my doormat. A plain white envelope with my name typed neatly on the front. No return address, no warning. I opened it with one hand while holding Eli in the other, still groggy from his 3 a.m. bottle. My first instinct was confusion. Legal speak always looks like a different language at first glance. But then my eyes landed on the words, "Petition for grandparent visitation." It didn't hit me like a punch. It hit me like ice. Not rage, not even panic, just cold, numbing disbelief. I sat on the floor in silence for almost half an hour, reading and rereading the document. According to them, I was emotionally unstable, financially incapable, and willfully alienating Eli from familial connection. They even had statements attached from Jason. Jason, claiming that I'd become paranoid and aggressive, and that I'd shouted at my mother in public. And all I could think was, they're trying to take him from me. Even if just for weekends, even if just for a few hours a month. They wanted a piece of him, control, something to post about, brag about, parade around like a trophy they never earned. But the fear didn't last, because I'd already begun the climb. It had started slowly in that parenting group at the community center. Someone had mentioned a nonprofit that helped single parents access online education grants. I signed up the same day. Within 2 weeks, I was enrolled in a fully remote IT certification program. Free, flexible, and fast-tracked. The kind of thing people used to look down on. But I didn't care. I studied while Eli napped. I studied while he cried. I studied with one hand on the keyboard and the other patting his back. The gas station job was killing me, so I picked up part-time gig work instead. Data entry, virtual assistant stuff, online freelancing. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid more than I expected. And best of all, I didn't have to leave Eli with anyone. I took every small win like it was gold. When I got my first $200 freelance job, I bought a used laptop on Facebook Marketplace to replace my cracked screen one. When I passed my first IT exam, I taped the certificate to the fridge. When I landed my first real client, an e-commerce business needing tech support, I danced in the kitchen with Eli until he puked on my shirt. But I didn't stop. I built a routine. I built momentum. I built a life. Eli started smiling more, sleeping better. I started sleeping, too, sometimes even 5 hours a night. We moved out of that shoebox apartment and into a small duplex on the other side of town, just outside the city, where rent was lower and the neighbors didn't smoke under our window at all hours. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, safe. I didn't post about it. Didn't tell anyone. I ghosted the toxic side of the family completely. I kept everything small, quiet, careful, until one day I got an email from the nonprofit's career support team. A partner company was hiring junior tech associates. Remote, full benefits, decent salary. They were willing to overlook experience if I could pass their assessment. I took it while Eli was watching Bluey on the floor behind me. He fell asleep halfway through, so I finished the test with one foot gently rocking his bouncer. I passed. The job paid 3 times what I'd made at the gas station. I nearly dropped the phone when the recruiter told me. My first paycheck came 2 weeks later. I paid all my bills early. Then I opened a savings account. A savings account. For the first time in years, I wasn't choosing between formula or rent. I was choosing which brand of diapers I liked more. And that's when I started to fight back. I didn't hire a lawyer at first. I couldn't afford a fancy one. But I found a family law clinic through the same nonprofit. They connected me with a pro bono attorney named Miriam, who had a stern voice and kind eyes, and didn't flinch once when I handed her the court petition. They don't have a case, she said after reviewing the documents. But that won't stop them from trying. She helped me gather everything. Texts, emails, that Facebook post, even a written statement from Cheryl. Carrie wrote one too, confirming how my parents had manipulated their way into holding Eli. We built a file brick by brick. At the same time, I rebuilt myself. I cut sugar, started walking with Eli every morning, got a better stroller, took up journaling just to keep my head clear. I was no longer drowning. I was moving forward. I still didn't sleep much, but when I did, I didn't have nightmares anymore. I started taking more photos of Eli, but not for show, just for us. Memories we could keep. Smiles. First steps. A video of him trying to feed himself mashed banana and ending up with it in his hair. He was growing fast. So was I? One night, I found the old envelope. The list I'd written in the dark, hunched over in that freezing bathroom. A better job. Childcare I could trust. A new place. School. Freedom. Every item was checked off except one. Because freedom, I realized, didn't mean hiding anymore. It meant facing them in court. Letting them see what I'd become. Letting them realize publicly, officially, legally, that they had no power over me or my son. And as the court date approached, I wasn't scared. I was ready. But I had no idea what they'd pull next. Because just before our first hearing, they made one final move. And this time, it wasn't just about me. They tried to bribe Ava. I hadn't spoken to Ava in months. Not because I didn't want to. We were civil, even friendly at times, but we both agreed that some distance was best. She was focused on school. I was raising Eli, and we were figuring out co-parenting slowly on our own terms. I kept her updated with photos and milestones. She checked in regularly, but never pushed. We had a rhythm and an understanding. So when she called me out of the blue on a Saturday morning, I knew something was off. Her voice was tight. Hey, are you alone? Eli was in his high chair, smearing applesauce on the tray. Yeah, what's going on? She took a breath. I think your parents are trying to get custody. Full custody. The room tilted for a second. What? They showed up at my campus yesterday, she said, unannounced. Said they wanted to talk. I thought maybe something had happened to you, so I agreed to meet. We sat down in a cafe, and they told me. They told me you were spiraling, that Eli wasn't safe. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. They said you were unstable, paranoid, refusing to let anyone help, that you'd cut everyone off, and that they were stepping in to make sure Eli had a chance at a stable family. My heart was pounding. What did you say? Ava's voice turned sharper. I asked if they were joking. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They tried to manipulate me, Jordan. They said I was young, that I'd wasted enough time on you, and that if I agreed to sign over primary custody to them, just temporarily, they'd help pay for my tuition. Offered me 10 grand up front. I sat down slowly. They offered you money? Yep. In a manila envelope. Cash. They said it was just to help me get through the semester while they stepped in as real guardians. I felt something rising in my throat. Rage, disbelief, nausea. But I swallowed it. They were calm, cold, like they'd done this kind of thing before. And the worst part. Ava paused. They had documents, legal-looking ones. They were going to try and get you declared an unfit parent. Using what? Facebook posts and hearsay. They didn't say, but they acted like it was already in motion. Like I'd be a fool not to cooperate. I was quiet for a long time. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Did you take the envelope? Of course not. I told them to leave, but I took a photo of it. I took photos of everything. And I recorded the conversation on my phone. They didn't know. I stared at the ceiling. Slowly, steadily, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. Not panic, not even fury, just focus. Because now I had something they couldn't bury. Proof. Real, tangible evidence of manipulation, coercion, and an attempted custody interference. Something any judge, any lawyer would take seriously. I met with Miriam the next day. When I played the audio, her eyebrows lifted in quiet satisfaction. Well, she said, sitting back in her chair, this changes things. We updated our case file. Ava signed an affidavit detailing the incident and submitted her recording. Miriam added new language to our response brief, citing attempted bribery and malicious intent to undermine parental rights. They tried to play a long game, she told me, but they got greedy. That was their mistake. A few days later, the judge granted a temporary injunction barring my parents from contacting either me or Ava without going through legal counsel. It wasn't a final victory, but it was enough to hold them off until the hearing. And that's when things started to really shift. Because around the same time, something unexpected happened at work. I'd been plugging away at my new IT job, quietly fixing bugs, handling support tickets, doing the kind of behind-the-scenes work that rarely gets noticed. But then I caught a system vulnerability, a big one, something that could have caused a serious data leak. I flagged it, patched it, and sent a detailed report to my manager. 2 days later, I was in a Zoom meeting with the CTO. And a week after that, I got an offer for a promotion, full-time with benefits, nearly double my current salary. They even sent me a company laptop and offered to cover childcare for the first 6 months if I needed it. I didn't know what to say. For the first time in my life, people were rewarding me for doing the right thing, and I wasn't going to waste it. I used the extra money to hire a private investigator. Miriam had mentioned that it wouldn't hurt to dig into Jason's claims. If we could discredit his testimony, or better yet, prove he'd lied under oath, we'd have a much stronger position in court. What the investigator found, it wasn't just helpful, it was gold. Jason had a record, not a criminal one, at least not formally, but a messy string of evictions, unpaid debts, and a restraining order filed by an ex-girlfriend just 2 years ago. The report detailed his history of unstable behavior, including angry outbursts and allegations of harassment. And better still, he was still living in my old room. On paper, he wasn't listed as a tenant. But there he was, living in the very room my parents had refused to give me back when I was struggling to raise Eli, living rent-free while telling a judge I was unstable. We gathered every piece of it. Screen captures, reports, timestamps, photos. We built a file so thick it barely fit in Miriam's binder. The final step, public pressure. I didn't want to go nuclear, but I needed leverage. So, I created a burner Facebook account and posted a simple, neutral message in the local parenting group. What would you do if your child's grandparents tried to file for custody behind your back while offering cash bribes to the baby's mother and living with someone who has a history of harassment? I didn't name names, but people talked. The post got over 200 comments in 2 days. And wouldn't you know it, word got back to them. I know because my mom called Miriam's office and begged for a meeting. We didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. We just wanted to be involved in Eli's life. But Miriam's reply was as calm as it was final. Then you shouldn't have tried to buy him. The court hearing was now just 2 weeks away. I was ready. They weren't. And they didn't know it yet. But I was about to walk into that courtroom with something they'd never expect. Power. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not physically, but in the way the walls seemed to hum with tension, like they were built to absorb every strained whisper, every nervous shuffle of feet. I wore a button-down shirt I'd ironed 3 times the night before, even though Eli had wrinkled it again within seconds of me picking him up. He sat in his stroller beside me, gnawing on a rubber giraffe, blissfully unaware that the people trying to remove him from my life were sitting just down the hall, less than 50 feet away. Miriam arrived exactly on time, her briefcase in one hand and a stack of meticulously labeled folders in the other. She gave me a reassuring nod. They don't know what's about to hit them, she whispered. When the clerk called our case, I stood. My parents were already seated with their attorney, a sharp-looking woman in a red blazer who oozed confidence, clearly expecting a quick, clean win. My father avoided eye contact. My mother gave me a tight, polite smile, the kind you give a stranger in an elevator. Jason wasn't there. We'd find out why later. The judge, a tall, silver-haired man named Whitmore, looked through our paperwork for a good 10 minutes before speaking. He had that way of drawing silence out just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Let's begin, he said. Miss Kaplan, you're representing the defendant, Mr. Jordan Reed? Yes, Your Honor, Miriam said confidently. And you're representing the plaintiffs? He asked the other lawyer. Yes, Your Honor, she replied, already pulling out notes. The first 30 minutes were standard. They made their case that I had become increasingly isolated, hostile to family involvement, and potentially emotionally unfit to raise a child without oversight. My parents nodded solemnly, like they were delivering bad news about a distant relative instead of shredding their own son's credibility. Then it was our turn. Miriam didn't raise her voice once. She simply opened the binder and began. She started with character. She had letters. One from my pediatrician praising my attentiveness. One from my neighbor Carrie affirming my consistency and dedication. One from Ava herself. Then she showed financial stability, my pay stubs, the promotion letter, the childcare assistance. Then came the Facebook post, the photo of Eli, the fake narrative, the manipulation. The judge raised his eyebrows, but didn't interrupt. And then, the recording. We played the audio of my mother calmly offering Ava money to sign away temporary custody. The courtroom went still. The words hung in the air like smoke. 10,000 up front. I think we can all agree he's not ready. This is what's best for the baby. I didn't look at them while it played. I didn't need to. When it ended, Miriam let the silence speak for itself. Then, as the cherry on top, she submitted Jason's file. The restraining order, the unpaid debts, the history of erratic behavior. Your Honor, she said, the plaintiffs have misrepresented their intentions and their character at every turn. They have attempted to undermine my client with false accusations, and they have sought to exploit the mother of this child with financial coercion. We're not here because they're concerned for Eli's welfare. We're here because they want control, and that is not a legal right. It is an entitlement, one that ends today. For the first time, I looked over. My mother's hands were shaking. My father was glaring down at the table, jaw tight. And their lawyer, she was silent. When the judge finally spoke, he was calm, firm. This court does not take lightly the decision to grant or deny grandparent visitation. It is a tool meant to preserve relationships, not punish parents or assert dominance. He looked directly at my parents. Based on the evidence presented, including the recorded attempt to circumvent parental rights, I find this petition not only inappropriate, but harmful in intent. He turned to me. Mr. Reed, full custody remains with you. You are, in this court's view, a responsible and capable parent. I didn't breathe until the gavel came down. And then I exhaled. It was over. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because I'd learned something in that courtroom, something that had been growing inside me ever since I sat on that cold bathroom floor all those months ago. Power isn't about anger. It's about control. Control of the narrative, of your choices, of who gets to matter in your life. So, I stood up, walked over to them calmly, and said something I'd rehearsed 100 times, but never actually thought I'd get to say. You've taught me a lot, but not in the way you think. You taught me what kind of parent not to be, what kind of person I'll never become. My mother opened her mouth. I raised my hand. I don't need your apology, and Eli doesn't need your presence. From this point on, you are strangers to us, and strangers don't get updates. They don't get visits. They don't get photos. I leaned in slightly. You had your chance to be family. You used it to lie. Then I turned and walked away. They didn't follow. They didn't call. And when we stepped out of that courthouse, Eli still in his stroller, giggling at the pigeons in the courtyard, I realized this wasn't just revenge. This was freedom, and it had never looked better. In the weeks after the hearing, the silence from my parents was deafening. Not a call, not a text, no birthday card for Eli when he turned 1, no happy holidays message, nothing. And that, in a way, was louder than anything they could have said, because I knew what it meant. Their world was unraveling, and they were trying to pretend it wasn't. Jason, who had so confidently submitted his statement to the court, vanished. Word got around that he left town quietly, maybe to avoid being dragged into legal trouble of his own. I heard from Cheryl, who still talked to some extended family, that my parents were now deeply embarrassed and had told everyone that they had withdrawn the case for the sake of peace. But no one was buying it, especially not after the local parenting group post made its rounds and people started piecing things together. Their reputations, especially in their tightly knit community and church circle, took a hit. Not because I went around dragging their names through the mud. I didn't need to. The truth just floated there in the open, unignorable. The kind, doting grandparents had become a cautionary tale whispered between neighbors and friends over coffee and casseroles. It got worse for them, though, because after the case, Ava formally modified our custody agreement. She named me as Eli's sole legal guardian until further notice, with full decision-making authority. It was her way of protecting us both, not just from legal threats, but from manipulation. It meant that even if my parents tried something again in the future, they'd have to go through me, not her. Then I made one final move. I contacted my old landlord, the one who had ignored repairs, jacked up rent, and nearly evicted me when I couldn't keep up. I let him know politely that I was now in a financial position to take him to court for multiple lease violations from when Eli and I lived there. Unsafe conditions, lack of heating, pest problems, things I had let slide when I was too tired to fight. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. I'm not that same man anymore. I didn't recognize the version of myself from 6 months ago. That man was drowning, desperate, hanging on by a thread. But now I was steady, focused, capable. Not because I'd found some miracle, but because I'd built something slowly, painfully, from the ruins. Eli started talking more, first with mumbled gibberish, then with real words. One morning, I was brushing my teeth and he toddled into the bathroom, arms raised, and said something that stopped me cold. "Dida happy." I looked at him in the mirror, toothpaste halfway down my chin, and realized I was. I really was. One day, maybe I'll tell him the whole story. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just raise him to know his worth, to know love doesn't come with strings. And that silence, when it's chosen, can be the loudest form of strength. And as for my parents, they still live in that house with the red door and the home theater they once bragged about. Only now there's no audience left, and the projector's burned out. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more crazy Reddit tales, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. And hey, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you would have done in this situation.